Wonderful greetings of today, my dear brothers and sisters. So now we have met again. So today we basically discussed the importance of the women in the society and and a and an innate need to basically introduce the measures in our overall governance system in order to make the women feel secure and to enhance the steps to empower women and basically eradicate gender biasness in order to make the two stratas of the society, both men and women, at an equal level. And the efforts are being made at a global level, and gradually we will be able to attain substantial progress in our sincere efforts. So dear friends, basically in the progress of our morning discussion, I would like to introduce the Iron Lady, and you need to guess her name. This is she. I hope I'm making sense. These are two Iron Ladies, that is Dadi Prakash Maniji and Dadi Janki ji. Both of them have left their mortal coil, but their personality remains alive in our hearts as they have inspired the masses, and they will keep on inspiring the masses towards positivity and spirituality. This is also another photograph of this iron woman, Dadi Janki ji. So, my dear friends, she is the chief of Brahmakumaris. She was the chief of Brahmakumaris, and she remains alive in our hearts. And she has propagated a lot of stuff on feminism. So, my dear friends, I would like to read certain words in her memory, which basically talk about the main essence of women empowerment. Hand in hand with celibacy goes Dadi's stand on feminism, very quietly, without any obvious fuss, stringency, or shouting about, but with total conviction. Dadi Janki is and has been all her life a radical feminist. This is mainly because she believes that God is first and foremost the mother rather than the father, and this has led her throughout her life to put the mothers first. By mother, she does not necessarily mean one who has given birth to a child, but one who really mothers, who nurtures, and who sets an example of how to behave. This strikes a chord with the Catholic faith, where nuns are often called mother or mother superior, even when they have never been actual mothers. On a more mundane level, Dadi's feminism also springs from rebellion against her restrictive childhood in India, where women were not only given no status at all, but were not considered capable of becoming the religious leaders. Although Dadi Janki felt a strong connection with God from her earliest years and wanted to serve Him, there would have been no way she could have achieved this aim without the founding of the Brahmakumaris in the 1930s, which for the first time in Indian history put women to the fore. So this movement gave not only Dadi but all the other young women who joined the organization a power, a confidence and self-sufficiency that Indian women had never before possessed. That's what our PM is also propagating, Atmanirbharta or self-reliance. They were now enabled by the sheer force of their convictions to venture out, firstly in India and secondly into the rest of the world, to start the centers and to basically usher a completely new kind of spiritual knowledge and wisdom. Inwardly, Dadi had never felt there was any reason why a woman could not lead, but both in the East and in the West, it was not easy in a society where women always took their status from the men in their lives. What was it the poet Milton said in the Paradise Lost? He for God only, she for God in him. The idea that a woman was a weaker vessel, and in many cases a very weak vessel, was a universal concept not confined to India. Given the weight of the society, custom, who also women's own generally low opinion of themselves, Dadi knew she would not have an easy task showing that women were the spiritual equal of men, if not their superior, in either India or the West. She might have assumed that women had more freedom in the West, as indeed they did, but when she arrived in the 1970s, she would soon discover that women had not even started to make inroads as the religious leaders. They were forbidden by law to be ordained priests or ushers in the Church of England, and there were certainly no women priests in the Catholic faith. There were no female rabbis either until 1975, and although women were allowed to become the ministers in non-conformist churches, the basic prejudice was so great that their numbers remained insignificant. During her time in the West, Dadi Janki has seen the things change dramatically as gradually the basic bulwarks were broken down and women began to be religious leaders. That's really great. First as a trickle and later as a flood. The whole thing took years and was the result of a huge and relentless campaign by women who were hardly aided and abetted by the male religious leaders on the whole. It has to be said. As long ago as 1975, the General Synod, the Church of England's governing body, passed a motion saying there were no fundamental objections to women being ordained. Yet for years it did not happen. In 1981, the women were allowed to be deacons, one step down from an actual ordained priest. In 1984, the Basic Synod voted for the legislation to permit the ordination of women to the priesthood to be prepared. In 1988, the approval was given to be drafted for the legislation, and in 1993, the measure finally received royal assent and became the law. And the first 32 women priests were ordained at Bristol Cathedral on 12th March 1994, a historic day. It was to be another 20 years before the first women bishop, the Rev. Libby Lane, was appointed amid much male and some female opposition. In basically Judaism, women were officially allowed to become the rabbis in the Reformed synagogue in 1987, and in 2014, Rachel Cole Feingold, 33, was allowed to become, if not an actual rabbi, then the next thing down in the Orthodox Jewish faith in America. Nowadays, at least at the lower levels, there were probably more practicing women priests and rabbis than men, and one wonders what all the long drawn out fuss was about. Even the most traditional of church and the synagogue goers have basically accepted that a woman can take the service, and for most it now seems perfectly normal to have the women in charge of a place of worship. But one has to remember that Dadi Janki was there first, holding court and gathering the groups around her when it seemed that women would never be allowed to become full vicars, priests, or rabbis. So you could say that she blazed the trail for women being the spiritual leaders and not having to take their lead from men. She was the first female Indian spiritual leader to arrive in the West, and if it was with less pomp, and circumstance than the male gurus, at least she has lasted and gathered strength over the years. The real Iron Woman. What a victory. What a victory. Because she believed so fervently that women were naturally more attuned to the spiritual than men, she was able from the first to move forward with utter conviction. And mind you, my dear friends, Dadi Janki has also been mentioned. Dadi Janki's name has also been mentioned in the Guinness World Record for having the most peaceful mind. She was put in a certain situation, and a lot of wires were attached on her brain, that is the EEG test investigations, and she was put to various conditions, and she was put to various conditions which might invoke a lot of stress, but she remained calm, and she passed all the tests with flying colors, and her name got revealed in the Guinness World Record for the world's first lady with a very, very peaceful mind. What a serene victory. Because she believed so fervently that women were naturally more attuned to the spiritual than men, she was able from the first to move with utter conviction. There were basically other ways too in which Dadi Janki was a pioneer in a strange land. There were never any suggestion that the nascent Brahmakumaris would be financially beholden to a man. Rather, They would raise their own finances and handle their own money. When she arrived in London in 1974, Western women were still widely expected to be kept by a man, to take his name on marriage and to follow where he led. Of course, that was also the norm in India. But Dadi Janki ji was surprised to find it so prevalent in the West as well, where women had by now claimed many freedoms for themselves, still denied most women in India. For instance, as late as the 1970s, it was difficult for women to secure an education or follow a profession in India, and divorce, even from the most dreadful husband, was considered a disgrace and reflected badly on the women, whatever the actual circumstances are. Women were still kept very sheltered and expected to enter into an arranged marriage at a young age. It was also still the situation in India that the birth of a boy was considered the occasion for rejoicing, yet the birth of a girl an occasion for sorrow and commiseration. Better luck next time. What a sad and disgraceful situation it is. I just hate reading this sentence, that the birth of a girl is considered a disgrace. Disgusting it is. Things were not all that different in the West, although the change was in the air. Even though she was Indian and from a very traditional background, Dadi Janki played her part in empowering the Western women to take charge of their own lives, to reject the conventional marriage and being kept by a man, and to claim their inheritance as people and spiritual leaders in their own right. From the start, Dadi Janki ji would not allow even the smallest suggestion that women were inferior to men, or had to bow to them in every little aspect, and had to kowtow to them in every little aspect. Sorry, there was a little misprint. She knew though that she would have an uphill struggle, and so it proved to be. The 2 small damp rooms were given to them as the classes and meditation sessions were originally held there. They were not likely to attract the rich and the powerful, and on top of that, Dadi Janki and her 2 loyal assistants, Sister Jayanti and Sister Sudesh, had a double, if not quadruple, whammy against them. For one thing, they were very sure that they were all Indians, and there was still much racial prejudice against Indians in the 1970s in London, and the charismatic male gurus were allowed special dispensation as they were exotic and mysterious. But 3 small women in cheap white saris were hardly a major draw. They were Indians, and very Indian. Mark my words, very Indian. They were women. They were all extremely small in size, and the 4th whammy was that they had pledged never to charge for any of their programs or events. That is, all the programs or events they held, that is all the spiritual programs they held, were all free of cost. That's a beautiful concept which attracted and amazed many people. So between them, they had a lot to overcome. Plus, they had no powerful or influential Western supporters. In the early days, the only Westerners they attracted were very young seekers of no influence themselves. So, what kept the BKs afloat in the beginning? One has to say it was the vibrations that basically emanated from Dadi, not just because of her connection to God, but also because of her total conviction that she was herself sent by God to actually proclaim a powerful message, and one that could not be ignored. When Dadi arrived in 1974, she was granted only a visitor's visa. She kept extending this visa, but in 1976 applied for a permanent visa and was given indefinite leave to stay. As Dadi Janki remembers it, she told the authorities, "I have not come here to make money, but for service." This is such a beautiful concept. I have not come to the West to make money, but to serve the humanity. Amazing. I have come as a mother. I want all of God's children to stay happy. Such a beautiful, it feels like she is pouring the flowers, roses and precious gems on all of us with these three beautiful lines. I repeat once again. I have not here to make money. I have not come here to make money, but for service. I have come as a mother. I want all of God's children to stay happy. Such unconditional love is so pure and serene, full of divine sanctity. Possibly because the authorities had never heard such a reason before, she was granted the visa. Obviously, she would be granted the visa. Obviously. By this time, the Brahmakumaris, that is the BKs, had been accorded the charitable status in the United Kingdom. Her view is that people often believe they cannot do anything without money or position, but she had neither of those when she arrived, and yet she managed to pack a powerful punch. From the start, she had a simple message for women who wanted equality. Claim your inheritance from God, trust in Him, connect with Him, and then courage and valor will be yours. Beautiful. She would say that she had a powerful ally on her side, God Himself, and by making Him her companion, she could basically accomplish the things that would have been impossible otherwise. One of those was to champion female independence and basically emancipate women from their centuries-old dependence on men and empower them to shake off the feelings of inferiority and lack of self-confidence. Women, she said, have largely lost their self-respect, and this is because of the external opinions have been imposed on them until they have come to believe themselves The traditional view in both East and West is that women do not have strong intellects and are easily swayed by others' opinions until they become hopelessly reliant on others, in particular men. So, Frolity, Frolity, thy name is woman, has echoed down the ages until many people, including women, have believed it. They have basically acquiesced in their own weakness and internalized it. Another Shakespeare quote, men were deceivers ever, from Much Ado About Nothing, found resonance with Dadi, who maintained that women had been deceived throughout the ages by males everywhere, husbands, children, politicians, doctors, lawyers, teachers, and even the religious leaders. As a result of this, they have lost confidence in themselves, and this lack of confidence and sense of powerlessness has been handed down from mother to daughter. In fact, mothers very often, perhaps unconsciously, imbue their daughters with a sense of inferiority right from the start. This is very disheartening, and this culture really needs to be changed, and it is already undergoing change. And that day is not far off when man and women would be treated at an equal level in all stratas. Dadi Janki was putting out a different message. Instead of putting your trust in the decadeful people who would always try to do you down, turn directly to God, where you will find all the answers you seek. Once women become aware of God's love, says Dadi, they will be uplifted and will be able to break free of the centuries-old shackles that have held them down. God alone, Dadi promised, knows about women's greatness, and that is Shiv Shakti. And once a woman holds her faith in God, she can uplift not only herself but the whole world. She can actually become the universal mother. So because of this, a woman does not need a male guru, priest, or rabbi to show her the way. When connecting with God, she will find everything she needs to gain wisdom. Traditionally, women have depended on men in all societies, but in order to remain strong and independent, as Dadi Janki saw it, women can actually benefit even more than men from daily meditation. That is the connection with the self, and then with the Supreme God, who is the Supreme Father. This basically helps them to transform from the weaker vessel into a stronger vessel. Dadi strongly believes that the feminine principle, which is all about virtue, is more needed than ever in today's world. She says, I have never believed that this is a man's world, and that we as women cannot succeed. However, attaining such success in this wicked world requires courage and honesty. Have faith, she says, in yourself. Go inwards. Understand that you do have a solution to all of life's problems. And by constant connection with God, you will know what has to be done. This is excellent. This is an excellent approach. I repeat once again. Go inwards, understand that you do have a solution to all of life's problems, and by constant connection with God, you will know what has to be done. It's so easy. Most of all, you must remember and never let yourself be influenced by what others are thinking, because you can access all the wisdom you need inside yourself. She always said that we are never without the solutions to our problems. I repeat, we are never without the solutions to our problems. It's just that sometimes we may have to wait a little, and in the waiting time, learn to remain peaceful and patient. Then the solutions will definitely come. What a peaceful way, what a peaceful and divine message it is. Whereas many women have had the aim of getting married, having a family, setting up home, and these days, following a fulfilling, high-paid career, none of these has ever appealed to Dadi Janki. She says, I have never thought of this. I have always had the thought that my life should serve as an example to the rest of the world. I never had any intention of wasting my money, of wasting my time on ordinary things, but wanted a life filled with unique purpose and meaning. I never wanted to be a leader who leads through a lot of external show, but a true leader leading through the power of truth, honesty, and power. Such a beautiful and pious message it is, full of purity. Dadi Janki also says that in these times of darkness and sorrow, a woman's role becomes very powerful indeed. That is the real role of Shiv Shakti. There are three qualities she believes that come quite easily to a woman. Firstly, tolerance. Second is mercy. Third is truth. I repeat, tolerance, mercy, and truth. Men can have these qualities too, but Dadi believes they come more naturally to women. The curse of ego is firmly embedded in the male psyche, and this prevents their spiritual growth. Women can exhibit ego too, but this vice is far more prevalent in men, and also more difficult to basically take it out, as many subtleties and non-obvious ways of showing itself. Men can take pride in their appearance, sporting prowess, earning power, ability to attract a beautiful woman, drive a wonderful car, in their intellect or academic achievements, and so can strut around, in the novelist Tom Wolfe's words, as self-styled masters of universe. Women are much less likely to parade their achievements, and so can move forward quickly once they realize the source of their strength, God within and without. On marriage, Dadi Janki is very clear. You must never, she says, become attached to another person, and in particular, you should never seek to own another person with rings or gifts. This perhaps Dadi's most radical belief does not go down well in all quarters where even today marriage is seen as some sort of ultimate achievement. Indeed, it has now extended to gay couples and been given the blessing of law. Gay couples such as Elton John and David Furnish have made a great show of their marriage to each other, as have Stephen Fry and Elliot Spencer. When gay women from civil partnerships or marry, they are much less likely to make a huge song and dance about it, highlighting once again a major difference between men and women. But marriage or any kind of permanent coupling can so easily become a trap whereby you become dependent on the other person and credit them without your and actually credit them with your success or blame them for your failure. How often have the husbands and wives blamed each other for the things that go wrong in their lives? How often does love turn to indifference, if not hate, in a marriage? People often believe that marriage or hooking up with a life partner will bring them happiness, but how often does that actually happen? Dadi Janki asks. No, the time has now come for each of us to become independent, to love our fellow men and women, yes, but not to seek a binding attachment to any of them. If we have God, we do not need an intimate human being in our lives. So, since Dadi Janki arrived in the West, marriage has become to be a show of wealth and pride in how much money you can spend, more than at any other time in the history. Yet many such marriages are a complete sham. It is often said nowadays that the more glittering and expensive the wedding, the shorter the actual marriage, and for Dadi, this is horribly self-indulgent and a complete waste of time and money. Indeed, she would probably go so far as to say that nowadays it is not actually possible to find happiness with another human being, either within or outside marriage. In time, the relationship will almost always become one dependency and attainment, and by concentrating on another human being so closely, the essential connection with the God will be lost. To Dadi, a wedding ring is not so much a symbol of love and commitment as a sign of ownership and dependency. Marriage itself, as many feminists have pointed out, has historically never been an equal contract between the men and women. Nowadays, there is much more equality, but by marrying somebody, you are still buying into an institution that has for centuries has its roots to the subjection of women. Avoid marriage and definitely avoid children if you want to be a woman of God. Dadi's defined position on marriage, family and sex has led to strong criticism to some people, and to some people belonging to certain communities and blogging on anti-BK websites often very nastily. So The anti-BK websites have caused the movement much hurt, but even so, Dadi stands firm. This is the true conviction and the unbreakable faith in God, in positivity, in optimism, the self-confidence, the charm that a lady carries in herself. A small lady a small lady, a tiny lady with an unlimited charm and self-conviction is extremely admirable. That's what Dadi Janki ji resonates. A divine figure. Some people have argued that Dadi's own bitter experience with marriage and motherhood and both against her will have made her such a strong opponent of family life for those who want to connect with God. And there may be some truth in this, who knows. But against that, it has to be said that for nuns and monks in the Catholic and the Buddhist faiths, there is the same attitude. For thousands of years, they have maintained that full daily connection with God necessarily involves separation from your young family of origin. A close school friend of mine became a Carmelite nun, possibly the strictest enclosed Catholic order for women. As such, she was not allowed to leave the convent to attend her own father's funeral. And she accepted this as the price she paid for dedicating her life to God. This is such a huge sacrifice. Not being allowed to attend your father's funeral. Such a great sacrifice. Jesus Christ said much the same thing to his disciples. Give up your family life and follow me. Separate yourself from what has gone before. Dadi Janki believes that at this particular time, all souls must reunite with God, with their own original natures, and that this has to be a personal, not a joint quest. You cannot connect with God in conjunction with another person. All our journeys must be made individually. Interact with God and not with another flawed human being, she says. That is a unique, eternal, personal connection with God by every soul. Dadi's feminist, some may say anti-male. Dadi's feminist stance goes even further. A vital aspect of the female empowerment, she believes, is not to be seduced by the vast amount of products on offer which basically purport to make women beautiful, to prolong youth, or to enable them to be fashionable. Dadi's own unwearing outfit has always been a white sari and is what she tries to persuade all the surrendered sisters to wear. No show, no perfume, no makeup, no visits to the hairdresser. That is as simple as possible. When connecting to God, these things also become completely unnecessary because you are no longer concerned with showing or making an impression on others. Well, only an impression of genuine goodness, virtue, and purity, she would say. That is a divine fragrance of purity. Most of the BK sisters look like nuns with hair scrapped black, dressed in simple white and with no jewelry or rings except perhaps a ring or a badge with the BK symbol on it. Dadi believes that today's women are totally taken in by fashion and consumerism, spending their money on trinkets and expensive clothes, and this basically takes a lot of earning power to afford. You can live much more simply than this if you want to be a true feminist. For many people, giving up every aspect of vanity is hard indeed, but it has to be said that generally speaking, the BK sisters look much younger than they are without the help of the cosmetic aids. If they have discovered the secret of eternal youth, it lies in meditation rather than the latest skincare product, a conviction that you are an independent operator, and the constant connection with God, the Supreme Almighty Power. In India, the beauty industry is quite huge, and Dadi, for all her years in the West, remains very Indian in outlook, and Indian injunctions from religious people against the use of money aids is not new, of course, and has been an aspect of just about very religious movements since the time began. It is never going to be the case that every woman follows Dadi's instructions to the letter or becomes a surrendered sister. She teaches and practices a counsel of perfection that by its nature a few will ever fully follow, but the example of one poor elderly woman coming to London, one of the richest and toughest cities in the world, and establishing a worldwide movement with impressive centers and residential retreats in many cities, cannot be easily dismissed. What a beautiful success story by Dadi Janki ji, a small, tiny lady with a great power of conviction and self-confidence, as described here, who comes to London, the richest city, with a white sari, with no money in hand or a very minimum money in hand, and influencing millions and millions of people there, opening a lot of centers, a lot of BK centers there, convincing people to meditate and connect to the supreme power, is to establish an eternal connection with that ocean of purity, ocean of peace, ocean of unconditional love, ocean of benevolence, and the supreme almighty authority, the world benefactor. This is extremely fantabulous. Dadi would say, if I can do it with no cards in my hands, so can you. That may not be entirely true, but there is truth in it. It is a strong form of feminism that more women should think about taking on board. This is the true power of feminism. We have heard millions of stories of feminism, great women entrepreneurs doing great globally, achieving milestones. But this great feminist story of Dadi Janki ji is extremely extraordinary, full of divinity. Now, my dear brothers and sisters, we are going to read a personal note by Respected Dadi Janki ji. When my husband and I separated in the 1980s, I had never before lived on my own, and although I had a highly paid career in journalism, I had no particular individual survival skills. 30 years later, I am still living on my own. I have a lovely home, enough money in the bank, and still working. Never have I been dependent on a man or indeed any other person, and looking back, I wonder whether I would have been able to make it, whether I would have been able to, whether I would have had the strength to branch out and remain on my own, to buy the houses and cars, and by myself handle it all with my own finances without Dadi's input. Somehow I doubted. Dadi showed me, this is the personal note from some great personality who got benefited immensely by Dadi's vigor and divine personality. So she said, somehow I doubted. Dadi showed me that it could be done, and while I have no wish to wear a white sari or expunge all vanity from my life, the feeling of being strong and independent instead of weak and dependent and fearful owes a lot to her example. Doubt and sorrow do creep in from time to time, but the ability to survive for 30 years on my own has given me a lot of self-confidence and guts. This is extremely extraordinary. That is the great inspiration received by this lady from Dadi Janki ji is really worthwhile. There is another aspect to all this, and one that more than any other exemplifies Dadi Janki's power of extraordinary leadership. In leadership circles, there is basically a concept known as the big D, or distraction. This means that if you genuinely want to be a great leader, you must never allow the distractions to get in your way or to dilute your focus. Whenever you admit a distraction in your life, your attention is basically turned away from your goal, and this means your powers of leadership decline. For Dadi, sex, marriage, children, partners, families are all big D's. Although her strictness may seem harsh to some, in her view, they are absolutely necessary to establish the kingdom of God on earth, that is paradise or Satyug, and show by example that one can basically lead a fulfilling life without any of the trappings that many might consider necessary. So my dear friends, this is the really extraordinary success story of our great Dadi Janki ji, who not only inspires the masses to keep on to actually keep on moving on the path of positivity and optimism, but also to move ahead with conviction and with extraordinary self-confidence, even if you have very limited financial resources, because the only wealth one should be very proud of is the wealth of the inner consciousness, that is the inner zeal, that is the innate desire to excel, the inner peace. That's what she said, Om Shanti, 3 times. That's what her real power of feminism replicates. Om Shanti, which means I, the soul, am peaceful. That is, I am a peaceful soul. She used to say this 3 times. Om Shanti, I'm a peaceful soul. Om Shanti, I'm the child of that ocean of peace, the God, my Supreme Father. Then third Om Shanti, that is what I'm supposed to do now. And seeing everyone with that same belongingness, with that same feeling of belongingness. What a beautiful concept. And this is the wealth which Dadi Janki says every individual should carry. Then you will acquire millions and millions of rupees in your hands, millions and millions of materialistic treasures you will acquire if you are spiritually rich with this great concept of peace, purity, unconditional love, knowledge, wisdom, power, from which comes divinity, purity, sanctity. That is Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti.